per capita, that is per person. But we're also talking about how those people live. Do they drive? What kind of cars do they drive? What is the quality of water they take? What is the quality of the nutrition they take in terms of food? Their education system is also qualitative to a large extent. So I'll start at what gets measured so that we continue now, all of us, step by step to see what is it that Kenya can do better. And you'll use all the three approaches that are used to, after all is said and done, how the currency is performing, the level of inflation, interest rates, incomes. After all is said and done, those things are condensed to report something called GDP growth. So one specific measure that you just look at and you can tell about the health of the economy. Forget about the verbosity we hear, including from people like me, politicians. We can paint a very rosy picture. After we paint all that picture, many times we get backed up by the data, or the data betrays us. We can come and say, oh, we are doing very well, we are doing this and we are doing this, or we are doing badly, we are doing badly. But the figure that shows you the trajectory of an economy, it is the GDP growth, either growth in either way. So how do we measure this thing called GDP, which is the gross domestic product, wealth ya nchi, productivity ya nchi? If it's, for example, today is 100, that is all that we have produced. When we say about 4%, 4.7, 4.9, 5%, what do we mean? We mean that that wealth, the gross domestic product in terms of productivity, has grown by that much. But how is it calculated? Because it's upon knowing how it is calculated, then you go to the variables. All of you guys are CPAs here, and even those who are watching us online. And you know, in every formula, there is the right hand and the left side. The right side is the one you put, let's say X is equals to now all the other variables. In our case here, X is the GDP. What constitutes that? So that we know, when you say 8 is equals to 2 plus 1 plus 5, that is 8. 8 is equals to 2 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2. That is also 8. So if you want to change the 8, then you either need to change this other side. So if you change this other side, what was 2 plus 1, you put it is 3 plus 2. You've already increased 3. So this other side automatically will be 11. So even the economy, you don't grow the economy by looking at the GDP. You grow the economy by looking at the variables that constitute that GDP. And what are those, so that we know in our decision making as a country and in our offices where we work, then what is it that we should be looking for so that the economy grows? Because when it grows, these things, my brothers and sisters, are not jargons I'm talking about. It's neither an economic lecture. It is about our lives. This thing I'm describing called GDP is about your pocket. It's about the quality of education Kenya offers. It is about the quality of our infrastructure. It is about the quality of where you live. So let's not break it down from your mind from being this jargon that is used by people. It's about you. And that's why I want us to be sequential in it. FCP, nipatie maji tafadhali. I think key point inahitaji maji kidogo. Now, and I'll be doing this so that we interact in the 30 minutes of interaction. Let's use the first one. We'll use the expenditure approach, the income approach, and of course, the production approach. Most of you know them. When you talk about GDP, There are those three things we put across. And forgive me, I'm starting with jargons. They'll make the point that I came to present here today. But we need to start there. When we talk about expenditure approach in measuring the wealth of a country and the growth of the GDP. So we see GDP is equals to what? We condense it to few variables because all the other variables will feed into that. We say it is consumption, this water I'm consuming, the clothes, the food you're eating here, the fuel. We say is GDP, you measure it using consumption, plus private investments, plus G. G is government. Government, G you can always substitute it to B. It is budget. What we read as budget is what is called G. And then plus net exports, which is, you put a bracket, X representing exports minus M representing imports. Reflect about that. Now, let's forget that we learned it in class. Just reflect now that you are already a CPA and an FCPA who is already working. Now, detach yourself from class now to a policy maker in your respective area. That what influences the economy is how we consume, plus how we invest, how we consume privately. Those are households and farms. Plus how we invest privately. Those are private investments. Plus then G, how the government spends money. Plus X minus M. What does that tell you? That all those variables are very important for an economy to grow. And we'll see how other economies have grown using those. So when you talk about growth of the economy, and you're still talking about deficit in our payments, trade with other countries, what are we really saying? When we talk about growth of GDP, and you are talking about decelerating private investments, what are we saying? Now that part we call G is what we look for and we look out to, all of us. How much is the budget? The GDP of many countries, the budget and the government expenditure only constitutes from around 17 to 25%. Can you imagine that? That the money we read as the budget, let's say 4.2 trillion, if you do the math, it will always constitute around 17 to 25% of the entire wealth. So it's about where we want to incentivize that matters, because the size is too small. Let's go to the second one. And the second one is the income approach. Income approach measures what? And by the way, the one I talked about expenditure is expending on the finished products. Economy uses finished products, not intermediate ones. The other one is what? Income. So when we talk about economic growth using the income approach, what do we measure with? Incomes. Can one of you just shout with a raise of hands kindly? Any kind of income you know about in the economy, or you as a person? Yes, my brother? Salary. Yes, that's called wages. That's good. Number two. Actually write that. That's part of it. Wages is the return of labor. Is what you are paid to offer your labor.
Interest income.
Interest income. Very good. Write that. By the way, you are already economists, you guys. Number three.
Farming income.
Farming income. That must be specific. You call it profit. Now, you don't call it farming income, call it profit. Remember, we are dealing with the final incomes. So what you call now, the return of capital is called profit. So holistically call it profit. Even interest income is also part of it, what was said by my sister. The other one? Dividends. You can call it dividends, but it may form part of the profits. But just write it. Rent. Remember, rent is an income to the landlord. It's also a return of capital into some way. Any other? Let me see whether we've forgotten. Taxes. Tax is an income to government. Remember, government is also an agent of the economy. They receive, they expend. They are also part of the G up there. I hope you have gotten what I mean. The incomes, we measure the incomes received, we aggregate them. That is also a measure of how the GDP is performing. Even subsidies is an income to the recipient. When the government, for example, gives a Nuga subsidy, it's not the shopkeeper who is receiving the subsidy. It is you, the end consumer. So it becomes an income. Now, let's go to the final one, so that now I go to the main point. This is just the groundwork. The other one is called the production approach. And to me, this is usually the most important. And we'll dwell most of our points around this one. Production approach of the economy measures all the goods produced at the final level, but it segments them per sector. It segments those per sector. But there are only 3 sectors in this approach. One is called primary production. What is primary production? Primary production is anything in any sector that gives or produces commodities without any value adding. So one is agriculture. When you eat a mango, it is all natural. But when you take mango juice, it ceases to be the primary production. When you dig mchanga ya kujenga, that is also a resource. So to that extent, then, agriculture is one part of primary production. Mining is also part of primary production. Kwa sababu, just ukinunua mawe, simeshika? Ukinunua mawe ya darugo, nilikuwa nimesema hiyo kwa sababu watu wanasema mahiga ya darugo. Ukinunua mawe ya darugo, what are you buying? Have you ever asked yourself, you know, why human beings sometimes we just dump how we are creators? Just look at this house. What has a human being created in this house? Just ask yourself, mawe iliendewa darugo. So who created that mawe? It's not a human being. They just took, shaped it, and built. This wood over here, who created it? It's not a human being who created this wood. Even this down here is wooden. So if you actually look at it that way, you realize that nature is more sophisticated than us. So primary production, hiyo mawe, mchanga, is also part of mining. Fisheries is also primary production. Forestry is primary production. When you hear the government has removed moratorium on logging in forest, is also a part of the economy, primary production. Now, in Kenya, we call it agric. It's like agriculture, but it encompasses other things. Approximately, it accounts for 18% of our GDP. Please write there because we'll be interacting about that. Write it as a formula. GDP is equals primary production, then unaandika hapo chini what is primary production of the things I've listed. Then, the second part, plus, the second is called secondary production. Secondary production is manufacturing and the associated. So manufacturing, transport, storage, transport is not there, sorry. Manufacturing and anything around manufacturing. Value addition. industry. That accounts for 17% of our GDP, approximately. Now, the last one, plus, is called tertiary. Tertiary accounts, tertiary is banking, insurance. All that you do, most of the CPAs, is in service because you offer your brain. The biggest resource for you in your office is not a vehicle, is not the building, it is you. So you're also part of this now. Banking, insurance, hospitality, that is tourism holistically. Transport is also part of it. Transport, there is a thin line. The part that there is a consumption of fuel in a daga industry. But where there is, in terms of service, it is in service. Storage, all that. Now, look at this now. All those things is a circle. It's the same thing I have said if you look at it, zoom it. Because I've talked about expenditure approach. Consumption plus investments plus government plus net imports. Then the other one, I've talked about incomes, income approach. Number one income is tax. But tax is the one that is government up there. The other approach that had government expenditure, and this is the other one that has tax, those one cancels out. Because tax is what becomes government expenditure. When you talk about profit down here, and anything else that is a return on capital, is what becomes enhanced investment up there. What is wages in the income approach is what becomes consumption in the other expenditure approach. But they are important, and they'll be important as I make the point I want to make. So now that Kenya is where we are, let's say an economy of a GDP of 18 trillion shillings, approximately. Now, what are the low-lying fruits in those formulas that then can bring about the expansion of the left-hand side, which is the GDP? But let's look at some of the economies and how they have evolved so that we come now to Kenya. Now, if you look at the UK, the US, they started with what? They started with investments, but investments for what? Please get me, because in my opinion, I think if we crack this nut as Kenya, then there is so much we can do. They started by investments, growing investments. It's called capital accumulation. But after you accumulate capital, it is supposed to be used for what? When you accumulate capital, remember you are importing this capital as a growing economy. But I'm still in the UK, US, when they were growing. So when you import capital, these are machinery. Remember, this is an import. When you import a lot, you are damaging the economy because you're part to X minus M. So all manner of investments in manufacturing, how the US did it, the UK did it earlier, China, South Korea, and the rest. You must grow industry to stimulate net exports. If you only do manufacturing to satisfy local demand, that manufacturing actually usually have a damaging effect to a large extent to the economy. Because many times you realize the machinery you've imported to do what you're calling manufacturing may have costed you more than actually importing the finished product. In my master's in the University of Nairobi, I looked for data for Kenya for the last 40 years. And my topic was about primary production, manufacturing, and the GDP growth. So I had already concluded, like many of us here, manufacturing, it leads to economic growth. If I never did anything with data, that is what I could have written in my report. Now listen, I took data for the last 40 years for Kenya, tabulated all this data. This was the outcome. That the growth of manufacturing in Kenya for the last 40 years has led to decline in the GDP growth. Can you just imagine what I'm trying to say? It seems like, I'm sure you're asking yourself, what kind of paper is that? Let me repeat. The conclusion of the data was 1 unit growth in manufacturing leads to 8 unit decline in the GDP. How is that even possible? Because obviously we know manufacturing must always lead to economic growth. And I'm talking about their movements. The growth by 1 unit in manufacturing leads to a decline in 8 units in the GDP growth. That looks like an oxymoron. But now let's come back home. Na tulizane maswali hapa. In the last 40 years, has the economy of Kenya been growing or not? Don't fear, just raise up your hand. FCPA, yes, it has been growing. It's only few sessions we had a decline, like Corona time. Even over post-election violence, we had an increase, but it was marginal. Let me repeat, has the GDP in Kenya been growing for the last 40 years? Wachani kuniangalia namna hiyo. Has it been growing, yes or no? It has been growing, that is the truth. Okay. Has the manufacturing as a composition of GDP been growing or declining? Now that is where the answer lies. So, have you seen what I mean? For the last 40 years, the economy has been growing. But for the last 40 years, the composition of manufacturing as a share of GDP has been declining. Remember what I talked about, 17% secondary production is not just manufacturing. Manufacturing is part of it. If you remove manufacturing from the 17%, it is around 8%. Do you know, in the 60s, the composition of manufacturing as a share of GDP was higher than now. That is why. But these are the real reasons. What do we call manufacturing in Kenya? No. What do we call manufacturing? Kwanza wale wasuti.
In some cases, we refer to it as juakali.
Juakali, that's one. Now let's come to Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Is there anyone representing any company which is part of Kenya Association of Manufacturers here? Or anyone who knows about it? Just mention one company which is part of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Mention one. Yes, my brother.
Bidco Oil Company.
Nyamazia hapo kwanza. Somebody to, I need the lady in green, please come. Tulisema hii si darasa. Wacha to disomesha hapa. Hapa. Somebody to give us a pen. And guys, I didn't come here to motivate you. I came here so that we keep thinking about Kenya critically. So write Bidco. You wanted to say the second one? Say the second one. Very good. Any other? Kenya Association of Manufacturers. I want you to give me who are the members. Yes? Yes, yes, sir.
I was mentioning KVM, Kenya Vehicle Manufacturers.
Very good. KVM, Kenya Vehicles Manufacturers. So we can put even Isuzu there. Is it? Yeah. Toyota Kenya. Let's put all of them there. Number 3.
Flower exporting companies.
Higher flower. Floriculture.
Yeah, floriculture. And even commercial properties.
Commercial properties. Let's first put that star. And I want us to reason together. Floriculture is primary production. We are dealing with manufacturers. Kenya Association of Manufacturers. But that's a good point. Put a star. It is not part of CAM. Yes, sir. Yeah, please say it.
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. Yes.
Mabati Limited.
Mabati. Mabati, yeah?
Cement producing companies, Simba Cement and all the rest.
Weka cement producing companies. Did I hear Mabati? Put out a Mabati. So call it Mabati companies, all of them combined. All of them. The last one. EABL. Put it there. Very good. Now, wacha tunyamazie hapo kwanza. And I want us to be critical because manufacturing is what will help Kenya. But let's look at what do we actually call manufacturing. And if you collect the data I took is in public domain. Go take it, collect it. You see, for the last 40 years, has the growth, because the decline of manufacturing is a factor of GDP, if it's declining, then the GDP should be declining. But now we see they are a universe. That we agree the economy has been growing, but we also agree even with figures that the composition of manufacturing as a share of GDP has been declining. Number one, we talked about Bidco. Bidco and all edible oils companies. Critically, let's think, are they manufacturers? Think. Go back to the formula we talked about. GDP is equals to consumption plus investments plus government plus X minus M. So in that formula, Bidco, they do investment because they have machinery. But they also stimulate our consumption. We consume edible oils. But now go to X minus M. If you define let me not use a specific name. If you define edible oils companies in Kenya, are they manufacturing companies or are they importers? That is the point. Because if we continue deriding ourselves and lying to ourselves, we will continue doing the same thing, but expecting different results, which we are not going to get. We will have edible oils companies become manufacturing companies that help our economy if two things happen. They source or the intermediate, they source the intermediate product here. Intermediate means to make edible oils, whatever you need to make it, if it's not coming from Kenya, you are an importer. If 80% of a packet of edible oil when you buy it, if 80% of the cost you are paying is an import, then you are harming the economy more than you are stimulating it. That's one. But number two, they'll become truly manufacturing companies when they start manufacturing for other markets, not just for Kenya. Why is that important? So that the machinery they have imported to do whatever thing they are doing with edible oils, their value becomes less than the production you are making. So that you cover up for your net imports. You cover up for your net imports by exporting. So I wish they were importing these intermediate goods and products, manufacture edible oils, then sell them at a premium in the outside markets. But if you only produce for the local markets, and the bigger component is an import, that is the reason why there is no manufacturing that is happening there. The second one here, my sister wrote, is vehicle manufacturing companies. In the CAM meetings, these companies sit in front. Tell me one vehicle manufacturing company in Kenya. The ones you mentioned are not. KVM is not. Isuzu is not. Now look at it this way. When you go to Isuzu, I can use Isuzu because it's a public company. Government has a stake in it. If you go to Isuzu yard today, is it manufacturing that is happening there or is it assembly? Now, the value of assembly versus the value of what you imported, what is higher? The value you are adding to this part and this is only assembling them. Between that value of assembly and the value you accrued by these imports, which value is higher? It is import. So is that an import company or is it a manufacturing company? You may see it. I think those two examples suffices. That, as we talk about manufacturing in Kenya, let's now stop wearing suits and speaking big-worded English. Let us go to where the rubber meets the road and confront the problem there and then. If you go to a country like Morocco, Morocco is now overtaking South Africa as an auto economy in Africa. But they are doing real manufacturing. They are not just doing assembly. So those real manufacturing are important because you must be mindful when you are a Mabati company and you are importing iron ore. So what are you doing? Just compressing Mabati and selling. So we must, as a country, look at, if we are talking about manufacturing, it is actually real, but it also targets outside market so that you pay for your net imports. You pay for your net imports by also exporting. Hey, it's so much jargon today, lakini mutanisamehe. I'll highlight a few points as I go to the close. How do we enhance productivity as a country? But before that, so that this makes sense, those formulas I made you right. I talked about US. US grew by what? Starting by manufacturing. Manufacturing for what? Exports. UK had done exactly the same before. How did South Korea grow? South Korea came up with a model called export-led growth economy. The economy of South Korea grew on a model which is actually now studied, called export growth economic model. How did they conceptualize it? General Park was the president of South Korea from around 1961. Was actually a general, meaning you know how he took the power. But he was a good man. He minded about his country more than he minded about how much money he would make. And he actually was able to check where the problem of South Korea was and how it could be solved. And I'm using South Korea because the size of Kenya is exactly the size of South Korea in terms of population. We are in our 50 millions, both of us. But we were the same in terms of the economic GDP per capita. In the 1960s, we were the same. But now, currently, a South Korean is 12 times you. So if you earn 100,000, a South Korean income is times 12 of what you have. Is it an oil-producing company? No. Do they have rare earth minerals? Not more than Kenya. So what is this that they did? And how can Kenya do something related? They came up with export growth economic model, where the economy needed to grow not by producing for consumption, but producing for exports. General Park formed a committee which was meeting monthly to evaluate how the exports model or the exports figures are running in South Korea. And in the 19 years he was president of South Korea, he attended all those meetings personally. All. What was the ramification? The exports of South Korea grew by over 360 times. Then they went ahead to check, how can we grow this economy even further? What do we, because you can say, oh, we have a committee then to grow our exports. We must go deeper, specifics. So South Korean model, some people actually say South Korea grew on corruption. Corruption is defined by using policies to benefit private. South Korea was deliberate to the level where they combined private sector and government together for the sake of the economy. So they created a category of companies called chaebols. Chaebols were meant to be big exporters. And what was the basis? The basis was this. If we needed to have, or if we want to have a company that can compete globally, let's say in production of zips, or buttons, or ties, if we need that company in Kenya, it must be very high scalable. Because when you scale a company so high, so the cost of production per unit comes down. So South Korea thought that yes, we need to grow the economy, everyone, SMEs, they are part of it, but we need some level of companies that can actually go out there and compete with the biggest companies in the world. So South Korea deliberately made policies, including funding policies, that benefited chaebols. The chaebols I'm talking about is a company like Samsung, a company like Hyundai. These companies, one was dealing with dried fish back then, but used the capital, used their profits to become capital to scale technology into other products. So the entire economy started by producing garments and apparels, high product, labor-intensive, pollutants. That's how all the economies grow. You must first adopt labor-intensive products, pollutants, what every other person is looking at, to run away from. Even them, they grew from that. Garments, apparels, then they upgraded to plywoods. The plywood is an upgrade. But manufacturing for export, plywoods then came to what? If you look even when we were growing up, Nini, they were either Japan, South Korea, Chinese. With low quality, low technology, not low quality, low technology. Then the same company plows back the profits. Now Samsung, in the year 2024, their research and development budget was higher than our entire budget in Kenya, one company in South Korea. Why? Because the government helped them through policy, first of all, to adopt technology very fast, transition commodities and production to higher technology products, because higher technology products have higher margins, and higher margins have higher productivity per worker. China, from 1976, you know, sometimes these stories are given and you might think, how is that so sudden? China was being ruled by Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was a uniting factor. He made the Chinese people to be who they are in terms of the country. But during his reign, there was something called the Cultural Revolution, where he was trying socialism, at the people to go into the farm, at the farm, then the product belongs to government, at the munagawiwa kidogo. You know, that's not how the economy works. Economy works through selfish interest. So hapo hakaenda kobo kidogo. And it led to millions of Chinese people dying out of hunger. Then, he departed from this world in 1976. In 2 years, there was some vikwazo hapo, the wife and some people called the Gang of Four. We are trying to subvert Deng Xiaoping from becoming president of China. But he succeeded in 1978. Now, this is what happened. One day, Deng Xiaoping was visiting Singapore, and he was astounded to see that homes had fridge. He went back to China, at the normal home has a fridge. Just imagine. Then, after he went back to China, he remodeled the Chinese economy. First of all, he opened it up. After opening up, he now started the same model of South Korea. Labor intensive, kwanza. So China also got something called adoption. It's like copying, so to say. So they could see a technology happening somewhere, no need of R&D, no need of tiring your mind. There is this shirt, start manufacturing that shirt. This tie, they start manufacturing exactly it. Why? The labor was cheap. So this company manufacturing a tie maybe somewhere in England, China would produce exactly the same tie by adopting other people's technology and then produce more ties and actually make those companies, they borrow the technology. Because you move from low production, from labor intensive, you still on productivity. Remember, productivity of a country is a summation of my productivity and yours and the other person. And what is productivity? You may even measure it through income. I don't know whether I'm being too fast. If you go to the formula I gave you about the production formula of GDP, service industry accounts for 65% of our economy because 18 plus 17 is 35. What remains is 65. But this agriculture of 18%, the primary production, is employing over 70% of the entire rural population in Kenya. What does that mean? 18% of the GDP carrying 70% of the rural population. It means the productivity is too low per person. So to grow the bigger cake, then grow the smaller cakes down there of per person. So I'm coming back to China, but I am attaching all of them. So China, South Korea, start with labor intensive. But labor intensive are associated with low wages, low productivity per worker. But you have no choice by then, because you are dealing with one a social problem, which is unemployment, but you're also dealing with an economic one. We need to grow. So labor intensive industries expand job opportunities. So you solve a social problem. But because the labor is cheap, your products become more competitive. But after that, the same China we know, 20 years ago, they were taking this type, producing it. But now, gentlemen, within a short time, the economy lands. Not just copying and adopting other people's technology. They start now inviting other people who want to manufacture in China. So you go there as an EV company. One of the things you have to sign is that you'll be sharing your research and development to the government. Your findings of R&D can be accessible to government, but there is no bigger whale than that. So companies go there because they think China is very robust in terms of the size. They establish companies, but the guys are intelligent. They are just taking up research, development. Now the reverse happens. Now the China we are talking about today, guys, they have the largest EV manufacturer in the world. Not using other people's technology. Their technology is higher than the Western technology in terms of EVs. Their batteries are higher technology than the ones Tesla is using. Their production per vehicle is more efficient than the one Tesla is making. Within a very short span of time, an economy moves from low productivity, labor-intensive sectors, upgrades to higher technology ones. Now they are at the apex. As I talk to you now, the rare ads that are meant for AI, China knew that over 12 years ago. They came up with a policy. Now the entire world realized last year that the entire rare earth in the world, China in their pocket, they have 70% of that. That's why you see, like the US tries to bulldoze China by some tariffs. Xi Jinping doesn't even call a press conference. He does only one thing. He regulates the import, not even the exports. He regulates who buys their rare earths. Then after some time, diplomatically, the superpower of the world has to call China on a round table. Moving from low technology, labor intensive, up the ladder, up to the apex. So, in my opinion, Kenya, we still need a lot of labor intensive industries. And these points I will not overemphasize. So I would want to take not more than 10 minutes to wind up. Kenya, in my opinion, unemployment, there is a difference. Forget about the figures we report called unemployment. Unemployment may deceive you. There's a difference between unemployment and joblessness. There is a word that gets reported is called unemployment. But remember, the definition of unemployment is somebody who has not earned anything for the last 4 weeks, and somebody who has not actively looked for a job for the past few weeks also. But remember, joblessness includes the people who already did that for years, they gave up. That's the biggest in Kenya. So we still have a big problem with joblessness. So we still need a lot of labor-intensive industries. But these labor-intensive industries must not necessarily be in primary production, because we will be trapped in a low-level equilibrium. A farmer in Kenya currently, whatever kind of farming you do, you are trapped in a low-level equilibrium. You will never break even in terms of breaking the ceiling to get wealthy until you upgrade to adding value to your own produce, either alone or as a cooperative. Because it doesn't matter, even if you have 1,000 acres, 10,000 acres, the margins in farming are still too low, and the labor that is needed is still too low, and the dependence on weather is still too high for you to scale. So you still farm, yes, but you farm knowing it's not the head. There has to be another head. There is something called capital accumulation. All the economies we aspire to be like, and there is one I am avoiding to mention because I don't want us to have both of this discussion with those political semantics. There's one country that I would really have wanted to give an example with here, but I'm avoiding it. You know it. Capital accumulation, the reason you guys, you see me talk about shares all the time, and NSE, is because I believe, to a large extent, the economic break in Kenya, NSE has a very big role to play. A developing market has a huge role to play to manufacturing, has a huge role to play in advanced service and technology. How? If you look at all those type balls I talked about South Korea, yes, internal resources were there because the government policy was deliberate. Come to China. At your own time, Google the largest companies in China and check who were their investors when they started. You realize one thing. All the countries that have grown in our generation have grown using other people's technology and money. Something called capital flow is critical and very important. That country I'm not mentioning because it has been politicized in Kenya so much, yet it's a very innocent, good country. If you go to their securities, to their stock market, called SGX, you realize the top 10 companies that are listed there, yes, the government is very dominant, but most of those companies developed and grew using other people's money. Other people's, I don't mean locals, I mean outside money. BYD is currently the largest EV manufacturer in the world. Who are the manufacturers at the early point when they really needed capital? It's Berkshire Hathaway. Who owns Berkshire Hathaway? Warren Buffett from the US. If you go to, you check in your free time, Alibaba, you check all those big tech companies. Capital flow is a critical element. Why do you think the US dominates us so much? The capital markets in the US on the stock side alone is bigger than the GDP of the US. But is it their money? Not necessarily. Because even a Chinese company lists on the New York Stock Exchange just to seem sophisticated. We must develop our capital markets to a level where we are able to attract big pipes of capital inflows, not necessarily outflows, because the capital we have in Kenya is not sufficient to grow at the level where we need to alleviate poverty and we need to uplift so many Kenyans out of poverty. That thing is technology. I don't need to gainsay the point I talked about labor intensive. Labor intensive is the lowest technological adoption level. Then you go to to skill intensive industry. After skill intensive, you usually go to capital intensive. After capital intensive, you go to technology intensive. Is it a coincidence that all the largest companies in China are now technology companies? That all the Forbes list billionaires, top 50, they are all technology companies. And technology doesn't just mean IT. Technology means, for example, if you talk about Dangote and the refinery he built the other day in Nigeria. To me, as much as that is manufacturing, is also technology. You are adopting new ways, more efficient ways of producing efficiently and more cheaply. Let me just read you some statistics here, because I don't want to take more time. There's a company called NVIDIA. I'm sure you have heard about it, manufacturing AI chips. Their research and development budget for the year 2025, R&D budget, was $12 billion US, which is 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings. One company, not the entire cost, their R&D, research and development. And I want to read from 3 different economies. In 2024, BYD, sisi tunajua ni kampuni ya gari. So we expect that the expenditure should be about windscreen, batteries, and etc. The expenditure on R&D in 2024 was $7 billion US, which is 900 billion Kenya shillings. Samsung, the one I talked about, their R&D budget in 2025, listen to this, was $25 billion US, which is 3.2 trillion. Our entire budget, as Kenya, almost, was one company's research and development budget. That should trigger us on why are they doing this? Because productivity is enhanced by technology. Any company that does not invest in R&D, what you do is to lag behind, or then you remain mundane. Your production becomes archaic. The same you bring it to the economy. So these are the points I just highlight. You can interact with them later. How I think we can reshape the future of some sectors in Kenya. One, of course, is high-targeted manufacturing. High-targeted manufacturing, high-productivity manufacturing. That can only happen again through capital flows that are unrestricted. Number 2 is deliberately fostering entrepreneurial spirit. The biggest problem Kenya has and has been having for years is patronage stifling entrepreneurship. Patronage, that the biggest employer in Kenya becomes the the occupants of political positions. And because we know they are not entrepreneurs, so what are they doing? We allocate capital where it should not be. Because when you become a politipreneur, the money you get, the profits you get becomes possessions. But economies grow when you convert possessions and wealth into capital. A normal entrepreneur, that's how they think. You start a bank called Equity. A normal entrepreneur, how do you think? On how you can scale it. So when you make money, you actually plow it back. Before we know, you've expanded to Tanzania. You've expanded to Burundi. You've expanded to any other place. You are a Dangote. You may be held by policy, that's fine, but you are an entrepreneur. You wake up in the morning to think about creating. So what does Dangote do? You manufacture, you start with importing fertilizer, You make money. After making money, you set up a fertilizer company. Then you go to oil import. Then you make money. You set up a refinery. You see the sequence. This person is using their profit not as possessions. Maybe in their bank account, maybe hata hawana pesa. But they are using this possession, this wealth, as capital to generate. But when money falls in the hands that are not entrepreneurial, the wealth becomes possessions. And when we do politipreneurship, when you are already not an entrepreneur, you not think like one. So you'll make money, stack in the banks, stack it in sacks for a rainy day politically. But this money, if it was in the better hands of an entrepreneur, this person would have made this 1 billion. They would already be setting up a factory to add value onto sweet potatoes to export to some other countries, employing 1,000 people. So that's how now this distorts economic incentives. When money falls where it should be, it becomes capital, and capital stimulates, and capital catalyzes. Capital flow, I will not talk about it. I've already done so. Energy is the last point I want to have. Energy. Because all these points I'm talking about manufacturing, high tech, but also any other associated. And I'm talking about it because sectors that are scalable, sectors that you don't rely on market prices. You know, when an economy is trapped in primary production like agriculture, you are trapped in something called market prices. Oh, sell your maize in market prices. But a person manufacturing a phone, they determine how much they sell to us, not based on market price, because you can differentiate your products. In farming, you can't. Anyway, that's another point for another day. Kenya currently produces around 3,000 megawatts of, roughly, 3,000 megawatts of energy. 3,000. We are actually not serious. We are not even near serious. South Korea, in manufacturing, 50 times is generating. Their installed capacity is over 50 times that of Kenya. Yet our populations are the same. Just think about that. Energy is the bare minimum when it comes to manufacturing and high-level technology. It's the bare minimum. It's the least people can ask for. It's the least an investor will ask for. So 3,000 megawatts of energy. A country with over 50 million. South Korea, over 50 times. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that their GDP per capita is also our multiples. In my opinion, this is what I've been thinking. You know, when we talk about AI, a country like Kenya would benefit from AI on one segment. Data centers. Data centers. We become a hub of disease. Why? Because Kenya has a nice story of selling green energy, which is abundant. But what stifles, nini huwa inanyonga economy ya Kenya when it comes to power? We go back, again, patronage. When we talk about production of power in Kenya, it's Kengen. It has maybe over 70% of market share. The other people are called private power producers. Tell me any of your uncles who do that. Or your village mate who do private power production and they sell to Kenya Power. Tell me one you know. Who you frequent with in a normal restaurant. One. That since independence, private power production is a reserve of people who serve in government at the highest prices. And then they set our electricity price. Because Kenya is based on something called take or pay. That which is conceptually was a good thing to make power, to make private sector invest in power. Take and pay is what? I signed something called a PPA. PPA is an agreement that I'll be producing 100 megawatts of power, and I'm selling to you. And you either take or pay. Initially, it was good to make me see value for my capital. But we need to liberalize generation of power in Kenya. It is better we have power we don't know where to take than have a deficiency in power in Kenya. Because all the other variables will be determined by how much capacity of power we have. Generative AI consumes around 8 times power than normal search engine. Generative AI, the one we all use here, generative, Gen AI, ile unauliza maswali. They use 8 times power, the background of it, than the one you normal search engine like Google. 8 times. So it means the demand for power globally now has only one direction. One direction called headed north. Going high, going up. And this is not likely to change. And our government policy must be so deliberate now that let's liberalize these PPA things. That ukiingia in power hivi, the best way to secure your future is to sign a PPA with Kenya Power, with arbitrators based in London, so that even if any other government comes and they want to revise these terms, their heads, their legs are tied. So we can continue paying political rent even after the occupiers of the office are long gone. And then we continue strangulating our own economy. We must liberalize power production in Kenya. Let's produce so much power. These laws we have, after you produce these megawatts, you have to sell to Kenya Power. No, we break it down. If an industry needs 50 megawatts, let them produce without selling to anyone. They use it. Because you're already deficient in power. We produce as much power as possible. And we become a center of disease because we have a nice story we can sell. We can even tell Microsoft, we can tell Meta, Amazon, and all the rest, we give you land. We also give you resources, produce your own electricity, set up your DCs here. Those terms will benefit Kenya better than just sitting around with 3,000 megawatts of power, an economy of over 50 million, and you're talking about manufacturing. Which one? One dam called Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. One. They are producing over 5,000 megawatts of power, selling to all of us around. And they're in the process of making another one of 3,000. Let me tell you guys, tutakuwa tunasoma Ethiopia kwa gazeti. Why should we make this happen when you have the opportunity to change the fortunes for Kenya now and in the future? We must break these PPA things and we liberalize power production because power is the biggest handicap that Kenya has in terms of production. And my opinion on power again, because I've been thinking about it. By the way, sometimes I wake up at night to think about Kenya in some sectors. And I write down some points because they disturb me. Take a company like Kengen. The government of Kenya owns 70% of Kengen. Is it 60 or 70? I think 70. What's the value of Kengen? If you bought Kengen today, the entire value is 63 billion shillings. 63. Kengen will be yours. But they are producing, let's say, close to 2,000 megawatts. Ethiopia, Nigeria, there are two companies that I would love giving examples with because they are listed. One company is called Geregu Power. They are producing less than half of what Kengen is producing. But their market valuation is 200 billion Kenya shillings. There's another one called Transcorp Power. They produce less than half what Kengen is producing. But their value is 200 billion Kenya shillings. Meaning Kengen, if we got a strategic investor, we could value Kengen at more than 350 billion Kenya shillings. We don't need to invest 1 shilling in the budget. We need a strategic investor, comes with money, the government seats part of the 70%, remains with only 35%, value it correctly at 350 billion, all this money can come and produce double the capacity we have in Kenya. We will have spent no money, we will have generated much more energy than we need, and the more you produce, the less the uptake cost and price. And then we make our economy much better, much more recipient to anyone who would want to invest in a place that has abundant power. Very lastly, outside of the things I was doing, I think today I'm not to talk about shares. I talked about them last time. Just keep on investing in the areas that are important, not just land. Since we met in Mombasa, the reason I'm not talking about shares, that day Kenya Power, for example, was trading at 12 shillings. It is today trading at 18. I know some of you I talked to who actually bought that day, because I mentioned, when we met in Mombasa, Equity Bank was then trading at around 60. Today it is 74 shillings. I'm not mentioning them to tell you to go and buy them. I'm mentioning to you so that you go and evaluate the companies listed in the NSC. NSC is still very undervalued. There are still very many opportunities in the NSC. Please, take advantage of such things, which you don't need to tire your mind too much. One afternoon is enough. You analyze, you make your decisions, you buy. And after you buy, the exit is quite simple. When you need money, you have it. Not just like the static wealth that we accumulate. I continue to say, as I told you last time, Safaricom is undervalued the way we are selling it, because I've told you the market is undervalued in Kenya. And we are doing a mistake as Kenya to sell Safaricom for 34 shillings. Last Friday, Safaricom was trading in the market at 34.25. Last Friday. But you are here selling to foreigners at 34. The company that was trading at 45 shillings in 2021, we are here selling it at 34 and expecting Kenyans to clap for us. That is the level of incompetence that Kenya cannot accept. This transaction, as I said the other day in a press conference, government has to revisit this transaction. And Vodacom, which is the parent of the buyers buying Safaricom, if there is any deal you have done with any government official, which is making Kenya lose over 100 billion, you are going to take the burden. The directors of Vodacom, I said, I'm waiting to see their response. Because I'll give Kenyans their phone numbers. If government cannot speak for us in the sale of Safaricom, Kenyans will directly speak to the directors of Vodacom, including the chairman and the CEO. Because there is no way I'll be here as an MP and as a leader. I have experience in the stock market. I know people are taking advantage of Kenya, and people tell me, oh, for political decency, you can't do that. Political decency when Kenya is losing 100 billion. What's Aikai? Are you getting me, my brothers and sisters? We have to do the right thing. If we get 100 billion more, Kenya builds more roads, we generate more electricity, and we lower the cost of education, Kenya becomes better. Education is my very, very last point. I told you, Kiharu, we are paying 500 shillings per term. I have been in my previous position. I know 100% Kenya is capable of offering free basic education, not tomorrow, today. Kenya has that capacity. And I'm saying several constituencies have already shown we are already doing it. And we are not throwing this ball to anyone. My proposal has been simple. NGCDF of Kiharu, like any other constituency, we started at 30 million shillings every constituency from our CDF. That will be 10 billion shillings. The counties, they also started at 10 billion out of the equitable share. And the national government, they may suspend renovating the offices every year. We raise 10 billion shillings. We need 30 billion shillings to make education in the senior secondary schools free and totally free, including the lunch program. So what is making Kenya to postpone such a program? I'm waiting for the budget making time. This is not an issue that requires a bill. It requires intervention at the budget level. We make this available. We provide quality education to Kenyans, and let it be. And as we continue expanding our infrastructure, the road and the rest, my request is one, as I sit. The government expanding roads is good, is even long overdue. But it must not be used. We come here to expand the Thika Road superhighway. We say we are building an expressway. It should be built because we pay taxes and fuel levy. But it must not be used by anyone, because I know the plan. The plan is to put up another lanes here, call them dual carriage, then purport to toll the road that was built by President Mwai Kibaki. If you are tolling the road, you toll the one you are going to build, or none at all. But the one we use for free, including the one that was built by President Mwai Kibaki, let no one dream that they are going to toll it, because you are not going to pay any toll on that road. The same with Mombasa Road. Infrastructure that was built by the previous governments, no one will come and put up tolls. If you want to toll Kenyans, if that is your inclination, do it on the roads you are building. The ones that were built by President Mwai Kibaki, we are going to use them for free, and anyone investing with that underscoring that they are being told to invest on Thika Road, and then they are going to toll the road we use for free. They must know. The same with Mombasa Road. The same with all the other roads. Our previous roads that we have been using for free, Kenyans will not accept to pay any toll on the roads that were built by the previous governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Another round of applause for Mheshimiwa. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa. As you can see, I know you've taken a lot of notes, a lot of learning. Mheshimiwa, if I show you my book, so much. So this allows us now to go to the Q&A session, just to respond to the questions, to respond to the comments that came through, the learnings, the approaches. Mheshimiwa, thank you so much for taking us first into the economics class. We were able to do that formula, FCPA, I hope you've written the formula. The G formula, right? And then coming back to the reality on the ground and what is happening, and tying that to the economic policy and to the theme, which is productivity. Actually, Mheshimiwa, you've done a lot of justice to the theme, from productivity to prosperity. The comments are coming in. Mheshimiwa, I think we'll take 3 comments virtually there, and then we take another 3 comments, then we come back to see whether there are any comments. We have James Mbobwa there, that great insights there, Mwesh. The Americans keenly watch the monthly payroll numbers, mostly manufacturing, to get a feel of how well the economy is doing. And this confirms your assertion that manufacturing is the one sure way to drive economic growth, as it affects a wider ecosystem, the entire supply chain, payroll numbers, and the entire selling and distribution. Yes, there was another comment from FCPA, Georgina Malombe, our council member, who's been following this conversation. FCPA Georgina following us virtually. Derek, if you can share that comment. There was a comment on floods. So as we wait for that comment, let me see by show of hands those who want to give comments. Okay, we have one. Okay, we have 2 comments here. We have FCPA. So we have, okay. Okay, let's start with the CPA, Monica. Yes. As before you go, that is the comment I was looking for from our council member FCPA, Georgina, that this conversation is very powerful for strategic decision making as a country. And then she weighed in on unemployment and joblessness is an interesting agenda, Mheshimiwa. Mheshimiwa, what are some of the realistic labor-intensive industries that we can focus on as a country? So what are some of those realistic labor-intensive industries? So let's take CPA Monica, then we come and take those 2 comments. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sipiotiana Monica is my name. I really want to appreciate Mheshimiwa for the initiative to ensure learners only pay 500 shillings. Congratulations for that, because that really touches the hearts of the common mwananchi, being that education is a basic need. And you've clearly shown that GDP growth is a summary of deeper economic activities and not just an end to itself. So my question is that in your dual perspective as both an economist and a policy maker, what concrete policy actions would you take to prioritize to ensure that GDP growth in Kenya improves people's day-to-day life, rather than just remaining a macroeconomic statistic? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's come here. We'll come to you. Let's come here. Yes, go ahead. Please tell us your name for purposes of response.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning once again. My name is Michelle Nyaka, and I have a question for Bwana Nyoro. In regards to what my fellow CPA has said, in regards to education, in Kiharu, you've mentioned that children are paying, or rather the parents are paying 500 shillings for their children to access education. My question is, what happens to the children with disabilities in your county? Are they able to access this proper education? I've noticed online you post a lot of pictures with regards to beautiful schools and everything like that, but are there, and I think I asked you this question online, but I did not get a response. So my question is, when you are building these schools, do you take into account children living with disabilities? Are the buildings having any access for them? Also, the children with any intellectual disabilities, are they catered for? In the feeding program, does it cater to everyone or only to the people who pay the 500 shillings? You gave a very good talk in terms of GDP and everything, but we are looking at it holistically. The children are the future. Do these children stand a chance in your constituency? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rin Wanjiru. I believe I'm in the right place. I am a teacher by profession. And when Mheshimiwa talks of 500 shillings, the learners eating chapati, the tiles, I am a receiver of the same, having come from Kiharu Gaturi. And therefore, as I try to empower our youths in Gaturi through the foundation, through my foundation, I believe through all that we've talked today and through what Mheshimiwa has given us today, I believe it is possible to integrate the financial and entrepreneurial education in our schools. So my question is, how can we do that? Because as we talk about reshaping key sectors for a future-ready economy, how is our next generation ready for this, and how can we help them? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can take two more. So go ahead, then
Thank
FCPA.
you.
Yeah.
Two questions. My name is FCPA William Ogara. Mheshimiwa, thank you so much for being articulate and being very simple in your approach. The first question is on the diaspora, especially at the macroeconomic level. I think this is one country in this continent that exports many young people, and they are doing so well even in terms of sending back remittances. What is the potential impact of growing that particular area going forward for our country? The second one is the CDF. I'm aware that it's been a real debate. It's been in the courts, and it would be very helpful if you just spend a minute just to share with us what is the latest and what is the potential scenario in the event the CDF funds are no longer available in our constituencies. Thank you.
Thank you, FCPA William. Lastly, FCPA Nguru. Then we'll come to you, FCPA Georgina. Please unmute once FCPA Nguru finishes the submission. FCPA Nguru, please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, it's really to appreciate Mheshimiwa for a very, very powerful exposition of how we can be able to move this economy forward. You allow me, to just say that, I've just celebrated my 75th birthday. So some of the comments that I may make may not be current, may not rhyme well with the Gen Zs, but, they are based on some observations. Now, in the presentation, you did mention about the service sector contributing 65% to GDP, which is quite high. And I believe that any significant increase will have in services would have a very great impact on the overall performance of the economy. Within the services sector, you did mention about tourism. And you also mentioned about the engagement of a cooperative framework. And you also did observe that, this Tiba, the Darago Mahigas are created, by nature. So my comment is about the fact that this country is endowed. It's really endowed with a lot of things. One of them is wildlife. I think we are a renowned country for wildlife. The other one is about the prowess of our athletes, whether they are marathon runners, people like Golma here, who, and Baluya, AFC Leopards. And, my view is that these are areas where we are naturally endowed, and if we got out of the box and we focused on making athletics a real industry or tourism being the driver, yes, if we can get a lot of people coming here into this country as tourists, they create a market which may not have. 50 million is still a good number, but not like the 1.4 billion of China. But if a lot of tourists came here, they would naturally, eat. They are also slaves, to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So they will eat things from here. They will see our wildlife. They will bring money. My suggestion is that maybe we do not put enough emphasis on what God has provided and our ability to leverage, on those talents, and maybe we need, to reflect on how, we might be able, to do that. We are all very impressed by what you've done in Keharo, and, we do really sincerely hope that other MPs and governors in this country, are keenly watching, so that instead of looking at these positions as individual empowerment positions, they see them as investment opportunities for their long-term future. Congratulations for all that you have done. I hope that maybe you might say one or two things, about that.
Thank you.
I believe that export, is better. If you cannot be able to take these things there, since the networks, the distribution networks, are generally monopolized by the Western economies, bringing people here, I think is still good business for them, and it's good business for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our time is far much spent. FCPA Georgina, if you can make your submission, and then we invite Mheshimiwa to respond to those questions. FCPA Georgina, please go ahead.
Thank you. Elias, kindly confirm if you can hear me.
Yes. We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa, for always being available for us as accountants. FCPA Georgina is my name, and I serve the profession as a council member, an elected council member. Elias picked my first question, but my second question and comment, one is I foresee Kiharu being the next Singapore, where we'll be going to benchmark matters education and application of CDF funds. But that said, I believe food security is very critical for us as a nation. And I believe agriculture, one time when we were a little bit younger, agriculture was the highest foreign exchange earner. But I do not know whether that still holds, of course, knowing that coffee and tea are still one of our key exports. But a matter of concern is the kind of drought that we're experiencing in the country, and especially on certain areas where, and those, what is most interesting is in those parts of the country, there are floods that happen in those places, and 2, 3, 4 months down the line, they are struck with drought, with famine, and this becomes a national crisis. Is there a way we can be able to mine that water, the flood water, and through that we make agriculture feasible in those specific areas? That is one. Number two, on agriculture, I do believe one of your submissions was coming up with highly labor-intensive industries. And I believe with agriculture, we can do a lot of value addition, and this can also contribute towards our exports. How can we mine the floods? How can we become a nation which is food secure? Lastly, do you think Vision 2030 is still feasible, and is it still valid? Thank you, Elias.
Thank you so much, FCPA Georgina. Thank you. At this particular moment, let's allow Mheshimiwa to respond to those questions and then to give his closing remarks. Karibu sana, Mheshimiwa. Let's appreciate Mheshimiwa as he comes back again. This way.
Thank you very much, Elias. I'll be brief. Bwana Bogwa, I can't agree more about manufacturing. There is no known economy that grew on any other route other than manufacturing, or even by leapfrogging manufacturing. So even as we adopt technology to do other things around IT, what manufacturing does is that it creates quality jobs, and it brings synergy within the economy, because any manufacturing company has a lot of synergies that happens around it, around the economy. And even the view I gave about South Korea, Samsung, LG, Hyundai, and the rest, they were created as chaebols majorly based on manufacturing, but they were supposed to harness the ecosystem of SMEs. So SMEs became the suppliers of the bigger companies, so that the bigger companies become more efficient in competing globally. So manufacturing, the beauty is that kind of synergy, that you are able to do backward and forward integration to other related economies. FCPA Georgina, I'll answer together with the one you've just asked. On labor intensive, and I see you are leaning more towards agriculture. Agriculture is good, but it only becomes better when it's not fully nature dependent. You know, many times people say, oh, but the US, there are also big farmers there. Or even in Europe, there are big farmers. I agree. But that cannot be our solace. It cannot be our solace because when you do agriculture that is seasonal, you expose the farmer and the practitioner to, one, vagaries of the weather, but number two, something called market prices. There's no money that is ever made by something called market prices. If you do production of anything that goes into the market and it's homogeneous to all the other products, the margins are always razor thin. And agriculture is dominant with that. There's no difference between maize, asijui ya hapa na ya hapa. Maize is maize. It cooks the same ugali. So it's homogeneous. Rice, for wherever place, it becomes same rice. So that homogeneity diminishes returns. And that's why farming makes sense when it's not seasonal. There you can produce when others are not. But also when you actually do forward integration by adding value to the produce of agriculture. Agriculture is based on something called diminishing returns to scale. We are all farmers here because most of us were brought up in village. Especially, we are not very sophisticated farmers, peasants farmers. So, what happens in our villages? You farm the place that is more fertile. When you farm the place that is more fertile, it is upon that place, time, that you go to the next one. You go to the least fertile place last. Why? Because the least fertile place will require you to water when the other places you are not watering through irrigation or any other means. But because you also use fertilizer. So in agriculture and in primary production, production is always based on diminishing return. The more you scale, the more the cost. So the more the cost, the more the diminishing return. And that's why manufacturing has always grown all the economies we have cited. Because they are based on something called increasing return to scale. The more you produce, the more you get. And that also comes to technology. Microsoft, when they are producing whatever they produce, like softwares, or Oracle, the cost of producing the first one is very high. But the cost of producing the millionth one becomes very low because it is diminishing return, it's increasing return to scale or diminishing cost. So that's why agriculture, yes, is good for food security, but I know no one country that grew on dominance on primary production. There is none I know of. And you need to know, even when we see these farms in Europe and the UK and the US, there is a lot of government in that farming. One Swiss cow, one Switzerland cow, is subsidized by the government of Switzerland 4 times the GDP per capita of a human being in Africa. Let me repeat, maybe that doesn't seem very palatable. One Swiss cow is subsidized by the government of Switzerland an equivalent of 4 times the GDP per capita of a person in our continent. So when you see these farms, beautiful ones, there is also a lot of government in them. Subsidies, is a form of spending. When the government spends or gives you subsidy, it's basically spending part of the money that would have come to them or which has already come to them. So we need to differentiate that. We grow agriculture, yes, but it is the same production we do in Kenya. If we are doing 50 million bags of maize, we can produce it with half the labor. That's what I mean. So these other half the labor will go to other industries that have higher productivity. Because if we do 50 million bags using half the labor we use now, we'll actually have doubled the productivity of the farmers that remain. But the other ones who now depart from farming will go to industries where productivity is higher than what it is currently is in farming. And I'm avoiding to say agriculture. I mean farming because what we do mostly is farming, not agriculture. FCPA, Monica, Learners 500, yes, I thank you very much for the compliments. on the concrete actions that needs to be taken, of course, to improve our GDP, from where I see it as a dual person in the economic sphere and also the policy side. I think it's most of the things I talked about in brief. Today I only touched one sector. I have analyzed most of the sectors in Kenya and what needs to be done. In my free time, that's what I do. Analyze one sector holistically. Like power in Kenya, I believe I know what needs to be done. Maybe it also guides some of the investments we do in the personal basis by seeing the potential that can be created in some sectors. In manufacturing, the same. But holistically is the things I said. But in terms of manufacturing, many economies like Kenya have tried something called import substitution. It was tried even by the former President Moi in terms of vehicles. The reason it never works, it has never worked. Not in Kenya, any other global south countries. It's because if you singularly just focus on import substitution, you are focusing on local domestic market. How many vehicles are bought in Kenya in one day? Ile tunaita ya showroom. How many are bought? So if you now set up a car factory, you are manufacturing local vehicles for domestic demand. The market is too small to make sense. So that is why manufacturing must always be export-oriented. So if you singularly just focus on import substitution, the capital accumulation you will use, the imports you'll do by importing the machinery to do that production, will hurt the economy more than the produce you are going to get or the aid. Because capital accumulation, remember, is all imports. So you'll be importing more than you are going to produce. So you'll be harming the economy more than you are making it better. So manufacturing must always be based by outside, not inside, in terms of markets. But I've given a brief, Monica. That's a thing we can talk for half a day, because you'd be talking about every sector. But because of time, allow me to be that brief. Madam Nyaga, again, thank you very much for education. And for the learners who are differently abled, we do our best. You know, CDF is also limited in terms of resources, but we make it our canon that the buildings that we are doing are accessible to everyone. That's one in terms of access. In terms of the other things we do for the able differently learners is that we supply or we support them with bursaries. Because what happens in terms of government, not every school handles the differently abled. So they choose per, I think, a zone. You'll get one school, let's say, Biri Primary has that class. You'll realize another one. We have another one which caters for the entire country in Kiharu at a place called Gasharu. When we are giving bursaries, most times we actually give for all the learners in that school. We support them in that manner because that's where our limit is. And when we are giving bursaries, of course, we give more to the abled differently because their needs are more and their costs in terms of being maintained in a school is also higher. Do the children stand a chance? I believe so, 100%. Both the able differently and the rest. Some of the things we are doing, for example, investing in education in Kiharu, for me it's not for now. Kwetu kuna kitu inaitwa unaweka, you know the way you put sweet potato in, unaifunika na ash ambayo ni moto, inaiva pole pole tu na unaficha hapo. Or you plant, or you do you plant a seed. What we are doing in Kiharu now in terms of education, our mind is not now at all. There is also a lot that happens underground. Beyond what we report in terms of fee, our staff has got a team like now, currently, an ongoing program, where we are going to meet all the learners. It is currently happening. We don't broadcast it because we are doing it because we need some, we are doing it for future. So, like now our target is to triple the number of learners who went to university last year. And we are doing it so empirically that I am sure we are going to attain it. 3 times the number that transitioned from our day schools to universities last year. We want to double that this year. But we are not just saying it, the way I'm coming here with a microphone and doing pronouncements. There is a lot we are doing hook underground. Attaching learners to mentors, making sure we guide most of them. The ones we see real potential of transitioning, we make sure learner per mentor. Every learner per mentor. So that whatever we are doing, mutashtukia tu siku moja, my engineers wengi, my doctors, wanatoka pahali. And it's again about productivity. What I say is this: we better invest in education, tuulizane kazi inatoka wapi. Other than kazi ipatikane, tuulizane watu wa kufanya wako wapi. So for me, let's keep on investing in education. A farmer who has a degree is better than the one who doesn't have. Their productivity is higher. Their husbandry is better. Their efficiency is more. So that's why, to us, education is so critical. Human capital, technology, R&D, productivity, they are all branches of education. FCPA William Ogala, thank you very much for the compliments. Diaspora and labor. I may have actually a different opinion from the many we all have. Me, I believe in Kenyans working outside Kenya as a remedial measure, not as a long-term goal. Kenya does not invest in our education system to train people to work for other economies. That 60% of our healthcare, qualified healthcare human capital in Kenya is working outside Kenya. Yet, you went to university and the government spent resources to take you there as a job. Like us, we went to university through job. In an ideal situation, all Kenyans working outside should be working in the country. But there are no those opportunities. For me, I only support it as an intervening measure. So this issue of diaspora remittances is a language of global south countries. It is a language of countries like ours, which we have already put ourselves in a corner, and we are reported by central bank, our remittances from the Gulf has gone up, tripled, and now starts as this. Because it's more a monetary policy than a fiscal policy. It's more about balancing inflows and outflows than it is about productivity of that Kenyan and the GDP. That person working as a house help in Gulf is better off working in an industry here in Kenya. So that's how I look at it. So those people, for me, is more, we are more solving a social problem than an economic one. You go, you get a job, but you have lost a resource. Why? Because our economy has no need for that resource. Let me tell you something. Sorry for diverting. When you see the Federal Reserve in the US giving their regular updates where they meet and they raise interest rate or they lower it, you realize one thing. These economies, what they are reporting is what is called employment of resources. Because within the same time they come and say, the economy created this number of jobs. They report in net terms. Those who are lost and those who are gained, so they report the ultimate, the net. So the economy added 150,000 jobs, 80,000 in manufacturing. They give those kind of data. Very important data. Why? We are always talking about employment of resources. When we talk about a company as in full employment, it means what? All hearts and all brains are engaged in productive activities. But the resources is not just about me as a person. It's also resources about technology, resources about capital. where an economy is so well done that it gives the owner of capital the opportunity to employ all their capital. So full employment in capital side. And because they employ so much of their capital, this capital creates opportunities. And these opportunities create labor employment. So you come, they report, oh, the US economy is in 4% of unemployment, created this number of jobs. It is a combination of deployment of capital, which brings opportunities, and these opportunities adds into production. That can't happen when you are training engineers to go and work in China. It can't happen. And I challenge any economists to come and tell me, even those who are advisors of our government, tell me one country in the world that grew on diaspora remittances. One. Then we can emulate it. There is none. But it's growing, it's balancing our monetary policy, but I don't think about our fiscal policy. When I talk about capital inflow, it's not remittances. I'm talking about capital, not consumption transfers. Remittances are consumption transfers to a large extent. Our senior FCPA, Guru Washira, thank you very much for all the things you highlighted. I agree about sector of the service sector. Service sector across many economies is always large because of the public service. Remember, when you are calculating GDP, what is also offered by government is also part of that. So education system in Kenya is predominantly public. Health sector is predominantly public. So those ones also account for the service industry part of the GDP. That's why it appears outsized at 65%. So it's not just about banking and what private sector does, like hospitality. It is also about services offered by government. And I agree, again, in the same, to increase productivity. You increase productivity, let's take, for example, banking. There is something I wrote, I think, the last quarter of last year. And I was challenging Equity Bank and KCB to merge. To merge and become Equity KCB Group or KCB Equity Group. Why? Banking, insurance, fintech, they are all facilitative sides of the economy. They facilitate. They don't produce. Nothing is produced in the bank. They facilitate. They facilitate the efficiency of the economy. So, when the facilitative side grows so big by offering domestic services, then you wonder, you are growing servicing what? Because the productive side should grow so that the facilitative one should grow. And that is the reason I was saying service industry makes more sense to an economy when it goes to hunt money outside to bring back home. When a local bank exports from Kenya, for me, I get very elated. Because these people are going to DRC to fetch money to pay a shareholder in Tana River, seated there, rearing their cattle. To pay dividend to my uncle in Muranga, pruning their coffee bushes. Mtu wa DRC anafanyia kazi Mkenya ako Kakamega. That's the beauty of having big service industry-based companies that expand beyond our domestic market. And my imperative was merge Equity and KCB, because we are no longer talking about banking in Kenya. We are now talking about scaling. So if these companies, cumulatively, they are making, like this year, they'll make around, combined, they will make a net profit of around 130 to 135 billion shillings. Both KCB and Equity will likely make 70 billion shillings this financial, this for the year ending 31st December. KCB will more likely make 60 billion. So 130 billion. If they can merge And out of conquering the other markets, they go to southern part of Africa, to western part of Africa, and their combined profit becomes 350 billion. It is Kenya that is benefiting. So that was my imperative. Some of these companies must be made to be big, to conquer. We have ABSA in Kenya. When they report profits, when they are paying you dividend, they also pay dividends to their parent company. Where is it? In South Africa. Netbank has just bought NCBA, or is in the process. Netbank is from South Africa. Why? It's big. Their market cap is over 1 trillion shillings. Standard Bank of South Africa is the largest bank in Africa. It is over 20 KCBs combined in terms of market cap. In terms of assets, it is even larger. So what do? Standard Bank is what we call in Kenya Stanbic. When Stanbic makes money in profits in Kenya, as they pay you dividend, they also pay their parent dividend. And their parent pays taxes. And therefore, my banking in Stanbic and ABSA is building a road in South Africa. Why can't we make KCB, Equity Group, we combine a big entity like that, it goes to hunt for money in West Africa, it hunts for money even in Europe. When KCB, if the combined entity reports 500 million in profit, we are talking about corporate tax alone of over 150 billion shillings. That's the money to build maybe 20 kilometers of road in every constituency every year. That's how I look at it. Service industry must be also outward driven. Right now you are chatting on Facebook, you are receiving money through PayPal, you are on Instagram pressing an ad. You know, sometimes I wonder, man, sometimes I'm trying to sponsor something on Facebook, and Zuckerberg declines. He tells you, oh, our guidelines cannot allow nini. Yani, these companies are so big, they are refusing money. You already willing to pay to sponsor an ad. But they say, we are reviewing for 24 hours. Can you imagine that kind of, in quote, arrogance? Because you made it so big, ati client anakuja kwa vizu na mwambia, wata tuangalie kama tukuadmit kama client. That service industry. That guy you are paying Zuckerberg is paying taxes in the US. So you are here giving examples. Oh, economies of the US is so big. Hey, superpower. But who is making it a superpower? It is you with your phone here, because you are using an Apple phone. With Facebook as your primary app, Instagram, the other one, Signal, I don't know which one, Telegram, these other ones. So you are here. When you wake up in the morning, you are here literally putting money in the US government basket. That's service industry. We must have companies that go to fetch money to bring home. We scale using the global market. Our banks must never, central banks should force them. You must look for regional and continental and global markets. Chaguvu. Because you need this money. Again, Georgina, I think I answered. There is one that was asked through a question here by CPA Sabuni about tolling of roads and the issue of Mau Summit and what happens. This remains my opinion. In our region, there is no country, other country, that is doing the experiments we are doing of making public infrastructure expensive to use. And as I talk about capital flows, capitals are impersonal. When you have money, 10 billion, and you are a global investor, remember you belong to no country when it comes to money. You belong to profit. The only goal is to maximize your profit. So, suppose we have $1 billion somewhere looking for a place to come or to go. Inatafuta pahali tu ya kwenda ilale hiyo pesa. Pesa, $1 billion, inatafuta tu kanyumba, inatafuta a roof to go there and hide. So, as that money is looking for a roof over its head, it is impersonal. It doesn't care the name of the country. It cares about how much is my return and what is the ease of me doing business there. So you look around in our region, Tanzania, Rwanda, DRC, Uganda, and Ethiopia. You have $1 billion. The first level of ease of doing business, infrastructure, is it there? Yes. How is it? What's the cost of using this infrastructure? That's where decisions start to be made. What's the cost of electricity in this place? Decisions already start now to solidify. What's the cost of using roads to transport my things? Decisions is already made. So when I talk about roads, it's not about politics. It's about the economy. You have the road we are dueling called Rironi-Mau Summit is a corridor road. It's going to another country and another and another. So you come and realize only the part of Kenya is being told. As it is now as we talk, is only the part of Kenya. What are we telling investors really? We're just telling investors, look for alternatives. We are a premium economy. A premium economy growing at 4.9%. We are a premium economy. You look for, if you don't want to pay toll, get elsewhere. My friends, we have not reached there as an economy. We need everyone. We need all this capital to flow in. So my take has always been, Rironi-Mau Summit Road is being used by Kenyans who pay PAYE, who pay VAT, who pay fuel levy. Fuel levy is supposed to build roads. So they are already taxed enough to build an infrastructure called road. And then you make them pay a toll. This is like renting a house. You are paying rent. You're already paying rent. But because the rent is on check-off, mliagree na landlord, kwenye unawork, anakutumia pesa through check-off, unakatwa direct. You know, kuna hiyo kitu inafanya kitu psychologically. Ukikatwa pesa kwa transformer level meaning hata haikufikii. Huwa hata huifanyii hesabu, si ndio? So because huifanyii hesabu kama vile unalipa tax, you already paying rent. And then somebody is coming to tell you, where you pay rent, you need to pay money for a living levy. That's what you are doing. And you'll be paying it daily. You're already paying rent, which is well valued, and you pay promptly. And it's even cut before it reaches you. Unajua ile kukatia stima kwa transformer? Ile hata hawadili na mita, yani unakatiwa vile huwezi jirudishia. So usakatiwa mshahara hapo na umelipa fuel levy. By the time you are fueling your vehicle, the money for government reaches inafikia government before ya yule anakuuzia mafuta. So you are already paying rent, and then Atirad Road tells you, you pay rent of 25,000. You'll be paying a living levy of 1,000 per month. Hata inapita rent. That is not sensible. That's what I've been saying. And it's an experiment that will not work because the economy of Kenya cannot isolate itself to our regional economy. Because investors will definitely look to the other economies. Look at some of the decisions we make. Kenya grew by 4.9% last year. How much? Tanzania, with elections, grew faster than us. With elections. Museveni grew faster than us. Uganda. It grew by around 7%. Tanzania was over 6%. Rwanda, double digit. Last quarter, they grew by double digit. Double digit means over 10%. The economy of Ethiopia will be growing by double digit this year. And you are here saying we are a premium economy growing at we are last in our region. And you are here touring roads. What mathematics is that? So what I'm saying is, and I'm talking about a government, Kenyans now have learned about the psychology of how this government thinks. You don't need to read an encyclopedia. You can already tell when you see an action what is following. Juzi nikaona expansion ya Rironi. Nikasema it's fine. It's wrong overdue. These people need this road because they pay all the taxes. but there is always a rider. I don't know why it is so difficult for this government to do just something good without something bad behind the carpet. Sijui kwa nini? Why can't you just do a good thing to Kenyans? Build a road, we clap, we move forward. But every time you see a good announcement from this government, and you know that as Kenyans, there is always a rider. We are expanding Rironi, Mau Summit. Tuna clap. After clapping, you are told, lakini kuna kitu kidogo itafanyika. You'll be paying to use. It's like me, I'm finishing areas. It's like me going to Kiharu, call a parents meeting as the MP. I've called a parents meeting, shairis have been said, tupigie mheshimiwa makofi amefika. And they know CDF, I oversight CDF. So they are waiting for a pronouncement because they had told me there are sort of 2 classes in the school. I want you to go with me properly. I go to a school. They want 2 new classes to be built. And they call me as the MP because they know there is CDF. And who is CDF? It is them who pay taxes. So it's their money. After Sairis are said for me, na makofi, na amuka. Habari ya wazazi. How are you learners? Nimekuja na mtu hapa, anaitwa contractor. Nimusimamishe. Atajenga hizo darasa 2. Mnasema ni pesa gapi kila darasa? 700,050. So we need 1.5 million. 1.5 million. Very, very good. Nimekuja. Huyu contractor atajenga hizi darasa na ataanza kesho. Na kwanza na point your contractor. Wewe unasikia? Ujenge hii darasa within 3 months nipata imeisha. After that, wazazi wamefika makofi. Niwaambie, lakini ikiisha, for the last 3 years, utakuwa unapea mtoto shilingi 100 kusomea hiyo darasa. Atakuwa analipa shilingi 100, aitikizwe yasome. Have I provided any solution to those parents? Are you getting me, you guys? So we come around a road. You already pay taxes. We should build it for you. And then we are telling you, you also need to pay for it. So that's why I'm saying the expansion of Mombasa Road, the expansion of all these other roads, even if you want to toll whatever you are building, at least spare Kenyans from paying for the roads that were built for free by the previous governments. Those of the other governments had other mechanisms to use our taxes correctly, to use our borrowed monies correctly and optimally. They were able to build free to use public goods. Please, whatever you want to expand, but leave the previous road free as it used to be. Just the expressway from Westlands, you have a choice to use the down one. But you can't say you are building at hii ya gorofa, ati utoro mpaka hii ya chini, ilijengwa hapo bereni. So Mombasa Road ikiexpandiwa, ile ilijengwa na Kibaki, ile ilijengwa na Kenyatta, na Moi, na Kibaki, na Uhuru, hiyo yote hatutalipa. Kama unataka kulipisha, wewe lipisha ile unataka kujenga. Thika Road ikijengwa, kama inawekwa expressway, kama ni ya gorofa ama ni underground, sawa. Lakini ilijengwa na President Mwai Kibaki, msirete hiyo cleverness ya kutaka kutoro hiyo barabara, kwa sababu hiyo hatutalipa. Asante.
Thank you.